I died in 2013 from a medical error. I glimpsed the other side, and I need you to hear my story. Welcome to Terminal. I'm so grateful to have you today. Girl, you are a friend, you are a powerhouse, and you died. I love how you describe that you were living recklessly, living an unconscious life, and then you died and experienced heaven, experienced the other side, and then came back and started living a totally different way. So welcome to Terminal. I'm so grateful to have you. How are you today? How are you feeling?
Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here with you, especially. We met each other almost exactly a year ago, and what's happened in that last year is just kind of bonkers. And so just really grateful to be here.
Yeah, it's been so wild. Small setup of the scene here. Danielle, I called you because we had previous friendship before, and I knew your experience of being a death doula, and I called you and I was like, hey, I have this idea about this podcast, and your words of confirmation were so uplifting, and it just gave me so much momentum. And we will get into the reason why your voice was so needed for that, you being a death coach, a death doula. But I just want to personally say thank you before we get into your story. Seriously, thank you. Terminal exists in a big part because of your voice and your confirmation. So thank you.
Oh, that was really cool to hear. Thank you. And thank you for reaching out and for bringing the idea to me, because it was really exciting in the moment. And like I lit up head to toe with goosebumps, or what I call truth shivers. And so it was very much a yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, I'm so grateful for you. So I want you to be able to share your near-death experience. Before we get into it, can you set the scene? Who were you before, you died and you experienced heaven? What did life look like before? Can you paint us a picture of that?
I can. So, I don't want to dive too much into just childhood stuff, but I grew up in challenging circumstances. Lots of family stuff happening, like many of us, lots of childhood trauma. And the way I dealt with that was perfectionism first, right? I was really good in school. I was really good in sports. My room was always perfect. I was that kid. Like, if everything looks good on the outside, nobody knows what's going on the inside. And then as I got older, perfectionism didn't cut it anymore. And so substances eked their way into my life. And so from a really early age, it was prescription opiates. I had lots of medical issues that caused me to have those prescriptions from a really young age. 11 was my first codeine prescription. And so really quickly, I learned how to numb and distract with being a perfectionist, and everything was perfect. And the minute I was away from everybody, what can I ingest to numb out and go to sleep, right? To just kind of get through. And I will say too, so those were the two biggest coping mechanisms. And the third probably was caregiving, over caregiving, right? Being that codependent, kind of unhealthy caregiver. And that led itself really easily into the medical field, right? The nursing field kind of rewards that behavior, like the management rewards the nurse that will always pick up another double. And so it all just kind of fit really well together, that behavior of numbing, distracting, living recklessly, unconsciously, and just in survival mode, I would say was the best way to put it. Just complete survival mode and unaware of that. I didn't know that I was living from that state of constant fight or flight, constant cortisol dumps in the body, but I was. And eventually those coping mechanisms just kind of stopped working.
Right. And so what do you think it was that kind of created that belief inside of you that you always had to carry it all? Like, was it your family? Was it, were you the oldest?
Yes. Yep.
So yeah,
I recognize that part of it. Yep. The oldest and the only girl,
Okay.
So both of those things. My parents had me fairly young. Not super young for the 80s, but my mom was 20. And she hadn't yet dealt with a lot of her own childhood trauma stuff and hadn't figured out how to cope herself. And so her coping mechanisms were kind of out of control, which then kind of led to me caretaking from a really young age and kind of parentified behavior. Um, and it all just kind of fit, I mean, looking back at it, I think the best way to put it is I kind of feel like I look back at like a second grade reading level, where it's just like see spot run. Oh, well, that makes sense. 1 + 1 is 2. It's very clear. But when I was in it, I had no clue.
Right. Right. So at what point did you have this near-death experience and what led up to it?
So I started working, like I said, in the medical field right away. At 18, I became an EMT and started working kind of on scene medical events. And then I became a unit secretary and telemetry technician. So I was watching the heart monitors and transcribing doctor's orders on a medical surgical floor. And then eventually went to nursing school. And so I was working as an emergency room nurse and really deep in my addictions. And a group of us friends had all gone out and we were just having a night out, a party night. We'd gone to San Francisco and gotten a limo, and I got completely blacked out drunk and slipped and fell getting out of the limo. Ended up breaking my leg, and then being immobilized for 8 weeks at home. So during that immobilization time, I didn't know it, but I was developing a blood clot in that leg. So eventually, when I went back to work after that 8 weeks off, I worked several doubles back to back trying to kind of make a PTO and refill the bank account after being off for that long. And I ended up, so I worked those 3 doubles back to back. I came home with intentions of going to sleep in the backyard. It was California, middle of June, nice and sunny outside. Like I remember putting on sunscreen in the bathroom and I passed out in the bathroom. No real recollection of like chest pain or shortness of breath or any of that. Um, the next thing I remember, my husband has come home from work. He worked the opposite shift as me. So he was working 12-hour day shifts while I was working night shifts. And so he gets home somewhere around 7:30, 8 p.m. at night. And I come to with my head on the inside of the bathtub and my legs are hanging on the outside. So kind of the tub is across my hips. I didn't remember it at the time, but I had taken a bunch of medicine for both pain in my leg and to help me sleep because I hadn't slept for days. I was working multiple doubles. I was in my addiction. And so the combination of the blood clot and the overdose on prescription medications, and I was out from anywhere from 8 to 12 hours. We're not sure exactly how long I was down.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, Danielle.
Yeah.
How did you not have an experience then?
And you know what? I may have, and it was blunted by all of the meds, right? By all of the
Okay.
drugs. And I think that's a
Yeah.
really interesting point because that's one of the uh, contradicting arguments one might bring up for near-death experiences. Well, these are just artifact of a drug-filled brain. But that isn't when I had my experience. That isn't
Right.
what was happening for me. For me, when it did, and we'll get into it, I was actually bleeding at the time. And I wasn't pumped full of drugs. So people bring that up often. And I'm like, well, there's kind of one argument that wasn't the case for me.
Right.
Uh, and so I do thank you for bringing that up. It's a really good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
And so, really long story short, with all of the medical stuff, but when you're down for that period of time, your muscles aren't getting oxygen, they start to die. That protein is released into the blood. That then clogs up the kidneys. So I had a big blood clot in my lungs, and now I'm in complete kidney failure on top of it. So they rushed me to the closest hospital where they discover all of these things. Um, I was immediately admitted to the ICU and placed on dialysis because my kidneys were completely non-functioning at that point. And somewhere around day 10 of the admission, I had gained an insane amount of weight and just fluid overload. When I was admitted to the hospital, I weighed 167 pounds, and on day 10, I was 209. And
Oh.
so, yeah, I mean, I just blew up. Literally, I was just swollen everywhere. And part of that, my abdomen was really swollen, and I was having a hard time breathing. And a resident did a procedure she shouldn't have done, trying to kind of drain some of that fluid, and instead she poked holes in my intestines. And so then I leaked poop and stool into my belly for 2 days before they realized what was wrong.
Oh my gosh.
So that very first night when they took me into the operating room, I coded on the table where they had to stop, right? They had to bring my heart back to a point where I had a heartbeat again. They weren't able to complete the surgery. Um, and so that was one experience where I feel like there was probably some in and out, but it's hard to tell. And then the next 3 days, I had multiple more surgeries and multiple more big kind of near resuscitation efforts. And so it's really hard for me to pull out what actually happened at what point in 3D time because there were multiple experiences of resuscitation, near resuscitation, major surgeries, all in a really short period of time. And so it was about a week after the final surgery where they needed to restart the blood thinning medicine for the clot in my lungs. That caused the incisions in my abdomen to bleed out. And so now I'm bleeding profusely. They're dumping blood products into me as fast as I can as I'm bleeding them out. And the nurse in me is looking up at my own monitor, right? Monitoring my own blood pressure. And the last thing that I remember looking at was a 46 over question mark. And then thinking, I had no idea that the machine could read that low. At the time, I had an arterial line, so it was reading a really accurate internal blood pressure. To back up just slightly, my husband, who had only been married to for a year and a half at the time, was not at the hospital that night. He had gone home with his brother, and he was coping how he knew how. And the two of them shared a bottle of Jack Daniels, and he was also passed out. So he wasn't there when I passed out in this bleeding episode. The next thought I have after passing out, and I put it in quotes because thought feels like the wrong word, but it's the closest thing we have to explain what was going on, that conscious awareness of an experience, I guess I would say. And it was simple, but it was, oh yeah, this is dying. It was very much a remembrance. It was something I felt like I had done before. It wasn't scary. It was no different than, oh yeah, well, it's time to brush your teeth before bed. This is just one of the things that we do. And I had no prior beliefs of reincarnation. I wasn't raised with that belief system. So for that to be the first awareness I have in this experience kind of still blows my mind a bit.
Yeah.
And from that point on, it feels like everything was completely simultaneous. It all happened at exactly the same time. There was no more linear time and space in the way that we look at it here and the way we experience it here. And so it took me years to even figure out how to pull apart pieces of the story to put into words. Because again, this is an experience, it's so far outside of the realm of our 3D, our material world, that the words I'm using are going to be approximations, right? They don't come close to what actually happened, but they're the closest I've got at this point. And it's interesting because I keep finding as I'm talking to others that I'm learning more words that come from other languages that are better approximations of some of the things that I experienced. And so I feel like English is probably one of the least useful languages in something like this.
Yeah.
From that point, like I said, it's all at the same time. But at some point, the light was above me. And when I say me, I wasn't Danielle. I wasn't this body. I didn't have a body. I don't know what I looked like, but I know that I had completely spherical vision. Like I could see 360 in all directions. I felt expanded. I felt huge. One of the things I try to describe to people now is that you don't know the pain or the discomfort of being in a container, in a physical container, until you're outside of it. And so I experienced that complete sense of freedom and kind of beyond weightlessness. I mean, it's just, yeah, you're just not detained. That's the only way to kind of put it. And the light was everything. It was where I had come from. It was what I was a part of. It was where I knew I belonged. It was home. It was the utmost of unconditional love. Um, And that love even, again, it's just, you can't even say unconditional love because unconditional is a condition, right? We don't have words to describe this. It's just a felt sense and it still gets me emotional. Um, and it's a place that I still have very much a longing for, a sense of homesickness. Uh, and it's a place where I know where eventually I get to go back. There's a lot to do in the meantime, but like I get to go back at some point. Um, and just knowing that that's there and that exists and that is all that is, that it's all around me at all times, like makes getting through everyday stuff kind of possible, honestly. Um, and so this part has always been hard for me to describe because, like I said, this light was above me and I knew I needed to be in it, but I had no body or way of pushing or swimming or propelling myself upwards into it. I was just kind of there and floating and it was above me. And I started to feel a sense of desperation, right? Not fear, but just, okay, how do I do this? Like, I don't understand how this part works. Like when you're in a dream and you're trying to run away from something and your legs don't work, and it's just that sense of desperation. And I knew I needed to be in that light just as much as I need to breathe now. And so that sense of was there, not in a scary way, but just in a like, let me in.
Right. Right.
And then at some other point or at the same time, I found myself in the middle of this thing that felt very mechanical, somewhat like a room or like a big hall, or um, actually, after speaking with someone just recently, she kind of described the Gravitron ride at a carnival, and I was like, yes, yes, arranged just like that, with like all of these kind of individual dividers or cells, like a Kodak slide projector, that you used to watch like family vacation photos on.
Yeah.
And I'm in the center, and this huge thing is all around me. And somehow at that point, my perception splits in all of these different ways so that I am somehow looking at each one of these little individual cells as like a photograph that I can look at like third person, almost like a negative. But it's also somehow like a 3D movie or holographic rendering of the experience that I'm watching third person. But I'm also somehow in the scene because these are all scenes and memories from my life, my first 30 years as Danielle. And so I'm experiencing it as myself, but I'm not just experiencing it from my perspective, but from that of everybody else also in said memory or scene. And so it was like omniscience. I had like omniscience in that moment. And I think that's right. Like that's looking through the eye of the universe who like it, we are all one. Like there is no separation. And so I was outside of the place where that separation exists. And so I could feel and sense what others were thinking and what they were feeling and why and how they were perceiving me the way that they were. I had some access to kind of who people were before this interaction that we were having. That gave me some sort of clue as to why they were perceiving the situation and me the way they were. Kind of like we talked about, like I could very clearly see everybody's childhood stuff and what led them to where they were, if you will. All their past kind of experiences, those feelings of inadequacies or abandonments or whatever it is we're trying to overcome in any given conversation or interaction. And I also had a little bit of access as to how this interaction changed them. So as to how did they respond differently to the world after this, basically. And now the way I kind of put it is just from a physics or a mathematical perspective that every interaction we have either sends somebody in a more positive direction, a more negative direction, or neutral. And so it's now I have that very weird, real awareness. And so it's always my goal to just, even if it's just a little bit, right? Like 1 degree of a vibe shift upwards, right? Like then that becomes a ripple effect that then I can share with others. And I also felt in those moments where I wasn't doing something great, right? Either to myself or others. I felt those negative shifts. I felt what it felt like to hurt other people, right? Even inadvertently, right? Even in my own unconscious, reckless living. I was hurting people right and left. One of the things that I don't know I've talked about a ton in other conversations is that if I was actively doing something hurtful to another person or actively being harmful to myself, right, through substance abuse or perfectionism or any of the other things I was doing that weren't helpful, eating poorly, not exercising, all of that good stuff. Both of those felt almost just as bad, right, as misaligned as if what I was saying and doing was good, but my thoughts and actions did, or my thoughts and energy didn't match, right? So if our words and our actions don't match our thoughts and our energy, that inauthenticity feels just as bad as when we're actively doing the wrong thing.
Whoa.
And like that's been a huge shift for me, where, because so often it was just like, again, as long as things look good on the outside, as long as other people perceive me a certain way, and now that doesn't fly anymore. Um, and so it's led me to just, I'm out here with all my stuff. Here are the things that many of us hold shame around, like addiction histories and maladaptive coping mechanisms. And instead it's like, no, this is just part of my story, right? That got me to who and where I am. And by sharing that and being real about it, I give somebody else permission to do the same.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody else can see their ability to heal in my experience, And so I think that's really important to note, is that it wasn't just about what we're doing externally. It's what's happening internally as well.
Right.
And so at first, I had a lot of time with each one of these kind of memories or scenes. And I felt like I would relive the entire thing. And then again, very mechanical feeling, it would click over. And then I was like into the next one. And then it would click over and I was into the next one. And eventually that clicking started happening faster and faster, to the point where it was just spinning. This entire kind of room apparatus around me is spinning, um, as I'm doing it in a clockwise fashion, or no, counterclockwise fashion. I had to look at it. We live such digital lives. Isn't that horrible? But yeah, it was spinning to my left. And as it did so and got faster and faster, it felt like it was creating like a vortex, or like a suction force upwards. And so I started to be kind of pulled upwards, and there was no roof or ceiling, and there was no floor in this thing that I was in. But yet I knew that if I crossed this invisible threshold, there was no coming back. There was no, like, it was like slipping outside of this lifetime for good. That was the decision point for me. And so while I didn't interact directly with angels, right, or Jesus or any other religious figures or beings. I didn't have a direct contact with guides. It felt very much like this was something I'd done before, and I just kind of understood what was happening. And so it was just like, okay, well, if I cross this, that's it. And when I recognized that, it felt like, again, everything instantaneously. The thoughts were, if I pull them apart, I need to go say goodbye to my husband. I'm coming home. Like, literally felt like I put my finger up at God for a second. Like, hold on, universe, give me a second. I gotta do a thing. I'll be right back. Like, hold on. It was so ridiculous. Uh, but that was the thought at the time. I'll be right back. And I'm gonna go say goodbye. That means getting back in my body, which I was not happy about. I knew that that meant getting back in there, and how painful that was gonna be and how broken it was at the time. And the way I thought to kind of get out of this thing, because like I said, it was just spinning so fast around me, I was like, I'm going to break it. I want off. Like, I want off of this thing like it's a ride of some sort. And I punched and like kind of shoved my arm, my cartoony, weird spherical arm, which makes no sense, through this spinning apparatus. And when I did so, from my perspective, I found my husband's hand like on the other side. And we did this like sliding kind of cliffhangery moment. And he like pulls me, and I can hear the noise still. Like, it's this kind of suctiony, but kind of, and went off to my right, and I felt like I flattened out, like very cartoon like. And then I was back in, and I was in my body. And from this world perspective, he had gotten to the hospital after I'd been reintubated. I was back on a ventilator again. And I hadn't been responding appropriately to doctors or nurses or normal stimuli. It's like 10 or 11 in the morning. He gets there and he starts squeezing my hand and yelling in my ear, squeeze my hand, I'm here. And I think that's when, from that perspective, I was like, oh yeah, give me a second. Right. I sensed him here. And that was when I was back. And so it was months after that. It was probably another 2 months in the hospital, month and a half. And then a lot more recovery time at home, a few more surgeries.
Yeah.
But that was all.
Wow.
2004.
Wow. That was in 2014 when it happened.
2013 into 14.
Okay. So because I'm familiar with your story, I definitely want to get into like the transitions and the things that were happening after, but I have a couple questions about specifically your near-death experience. As you were just talking, putting your finger up at God and saying, just a minute. I'm curious if you look at that as like a final act of love that you were going to go say goodbye, and how you've thought about that, if that's felt like an act of God or act of love towards your husband. What are your thoughts around that?
It's interesting because at the time it didn't feel final even, right? It was just like if you're going to go leave a party and you haven't said goodbye to your friends yet, but you're going to leave with another set of friends, like you go find them and you tell them goodbye first, right? It felt that, again, like kind of almost that simple. And I think that's where, in that moment of you putting my finger up at God, and again, I have to laugh at it, right? Like, because it's insane to think about. And I struggled with it afterwards because it felt like it was, I really struggled for the first several years because it genuinely felt like it was like, oh, you're in charge? Okay, bye. Go ahead. Go ahead and live the next however many years down there. Figure it out. Yeah, be here when you're ready, you know? And so kind of getting past that feeling of like that the door got shut behind me and I got stuck here, right? There were several years of that were really hard. And so
Were you resentful? Were you angry, resentful? Yeah.
Resentful, just sad, I think. I was just really sad. Like I grieved hard. I have never felt a longing or like a homesickness for anywhere on the planet. We moved a lot as a kid. I changed schools a lot, so you changed friends a lot. And so like I didn't really put kind of roots down. And so Luke and I, my husband and I, were just talking about this maybe last week, a week or two ago, and we counted it up. We've only been married 15 years and we've lived in 12 places together. We bought 5
wow.
houses. So like,
wow,
this has continued. Like we're kind of like little nomads. And so this was like that, okay, I know that there's somewhere I belong now. I know that there's something so much more real than this, right? This is the thing we come and we experience and we do and we learn and we grow and we expand and we love and we lose and all of these things happen here. But it's very much, it's like a play or a video game or any other analogy that like has been used before. But it's temporary.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that perspective. I just got to jump in here really fast. Danielle's near-death experience is nothing short of a miracle. And one of the ways that I know this is absolutely true is Danielle sent me pictures of her medical procedures that she was going through. And oh my gosh, they were very graphic, so I cannot share them with you today. But let me tell you this, Danielle being here to share her near-death experience is a true miracle. Heaven sometimes, yes, it is in the near-death experience, but also when you look for it, heaven is in the earthly experience as well. And Danielle's story is just that. And I'm so grateful she's here to share more of her story. But first, before we get back to it, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. If you are liking what you are hearing and seeing, it would mean the absolute world to me if you could just hit that subscribe button. It tells the big wide YouTube universe that, hey, this content's worth sharing, get it out there. And if you want to put a comment down below of something that you liked in this episode, let's start up a conversation. Love the life review. I just absolutely love the life review concept. It actually motivates me a lot in my life to to think like, okay, if I'm going to have to experience this from everybody's perspective, am I going to have to review a positive thing, a negative thing? Not all. I know I'm not in control of it all. I know that, but it's very motivating for me to act in loving ways. And I'm very curious if you have had maybe, is there a scene or a memory that you saw in your life review that keeps coming up for you as of late? Maybe whatever's going on in your life, you reflect on this certain thing that you saw in your life review and you don't want to repeat it, or you have different thoughts about it. I'm curious if there's any of that that's coming up for you in your current life where you're at.
There is actually, and that's a really great question and a good way of putting it, because it does shift and change, based on what's happening in my world. And what has come up quite a bit recently is that theme of not caring for myself as well as I'm caring for others. Or that theme of what's happening externally doesn't always match what's happening in here. I've gotten really busy. Work is going really well. This we'll get into, but right, this death doula work it's gaining a lot of international attention, and people are starting to reach out from kind of all over, and it's all beautiful and going great. And I have a physical body I have to tend to. I still have these things that it's like, okay, I might understand on a broader scale that I did before, right? This bigger kind of cosmic picture of what's going on. But I'm still here, and I'm still 3D, and I'm still in a body, and it still requires tending and care. And so I find I have a pattern of slipping out of that and out of remembering it. And so a lot of those things have popped up for me recently, of those
Very
moments of
interesting.
like just continuing to go when I knew better, continuing to push and like hearing the whispers. Because I heard all the whispers before I went into the hospital, but I got really good at ignoring them, And so it's just like, ooh, are you ignoring whispers again? And I'm like, well, maybe a little.
So you're saying even after having a near-death experience, it's not perfect and it's not, you're still human?
Very much so. Very much
Yeah.
so.
Well, I think it's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking that, a near-death experiencer has had this grand visual of the other side. Like, it must be clear. It must be so clear now.
Mm. Sometimes, right? Sometimes there's these glimpses, like these moments of like, okay, and like I'm in the flow, right? And I'm in a place of trust and in a place of surrender and out of the very real human egoic need for the illusion of control. Right. And so when we feel scared or we feel vulnerable or we feel exposed, like I tend to slide into those places where can I grasp onto something, which pulls me out of all of those other things I mentioned, right? Of trust and surrender and flow and all of that. I think I'm much better at recognizing when I'm coming out of it, right? When I've clawed my way out of the river of life and I'm on the bank grasping for any twig I can hold on to. And I've just noticed recently that I'm like, oh, you're getting a little towards the edges here. Like it's time to just like fall back and hold your breath and just coast again. Like you're good.
So do you have any practices that you put into place, something that's, old you would have never done this, to help you have this remembering or this higher knowledge of how you should be acting and, in this specific scenario? Daniel's probably not getting as much attention as she needs. So what is your practice to help you get back to alignment?
It's a good question. And I've been doing my best to get back into it. So the things I'm going to mention right now are not things that I have been really great about doing. Only recently in the last 5 weeks, I had a kind of, again, complications of all the other stuff, but had a surgery about 5 weeks ago. And so that kind of forced downtime brought a lot of this stuff up. So as you ask that question, I'm like, yeah, I'm very aware of it right now. One of the things, and this was a really hard one for I think both of us to get to, but has been really important for me, is that, right, my husband and I have a great marriage. We love each other. And I have a guest bedroom that is set up as kind of my room, right? That's decorated the way I want, that's got like the bedding that I want in there and like all my squishy pillows and all my things. And so when I'm kind of feeling that overwhelm and it's like, hey, I just need a night. I need a night to sleep in my own space, like to not hear the dog snoring, to, like all of the stuff. And that has become really important for me, like that little act of like owning my own energetic space and like being able to ask for it. And it's great to ask for it from the person who is the closest to me in the world, who I trust the most in the world, the most safe. So it's a great practice of being able to do that in everyday life, of even if I need to reschedule a client, where it's like, hey, I want to be fully present for you and I can't do that right now.
Yeah.
Can we reschedule, you know, um, or whatever it is. So I think that's a big one for me. It's just being able to kind of claim my space. And it's great. At first, when we suggested this, that we kind of talked through it, I think both of us were afraid of it. I was afraid to ask for it. And then if I did, like, he was kind of like, oh, what did I do? Like, why do you need that now? And now when I'm pushing it, he's like, hey, do you maybe need a night? And I'm like, yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you for recognizing that. I love you.
Yeah.
And we can kind of
Yeah.
say goodbye in the hallway and then good morning in the morning. And it's great. So that's been big for me. Journaling is huge. When I do it consistently, I feel so much better and so much more grounded and so much more me. And I think it's because I'm not trying to hold on to all of this stuff that's just fleeting. Like I just need a way of getting it out of my system, out of my body. Um, and along those same lines, yoga, and just even if it's not a formal yoga practice, but just that stretching and breathing with my body as I move it. Even if I'm only doing that for a few minutes a day, it is an absolute game changer for me. When I'm not doing it, I feel it.
Yeah.
I really feel it quickly. So,
Well, yeah, thank you for sharing kind of some of your practices because it's so easy to just be doing so well, so well, so well. And then you just slip into old habits or slip into forgetting to love yourself. So thank you for sharing that because it's just ideas. Like it's just somebody else's tools that maybe I can try to improve my own experience here. So thank you.
absolutely.
Yeah. So take us to, you came into your body. Kind of share with me. I mean, were you ready to go gung ho about your life with this new perspective? And then, so that didn't happen, right? So, what happened after to kind of bring you into the space of becoming a death doula? Like, that sounds to me very heavenly guided. And so, I'd love to hear how you went from near death experiencer or near death experience to becoming a death doula.
Yeah. So it was definitely not an overnight, okay, I get it all. It all makes sense. Everything's great. There was still, like I said, a long time of medical recovery and multiple surgeries after getting out of the hospital. And then as soon as I was kind of released from the surgical medical team, my husband and I moved down to the Virgin Islands. And we lived on St. Croix for about 5 years and kind of very quickly fell right back into old patterns. I was no longer using opiates. I very quickly was like, okay, those are no good. Like, get away from all of that. But island life is kind of surrounds drinking. It's not really what are we gonna do today? It's where are we gonna go drink? Which beach are we partying on? And that's just kind of the life. And so very quickly we fell back into those patterns. And I honestly, I was a complete mess for those first few years. Like I experienced what now I understand is like a pretty big sense of depersonalization, not knowing or being able to distinguish entirely what was real. I would have these moments laying on the beach, very often around sunset. Um, and I'd ask my husband a few times, like, hey, we're really here, right? Like this is happening. And I'm sure it scared him, he'd kind of look at me like, what do you mean? And I had this fear that none of this was actually happening, that I was still in the hospital in a coma. And this is how I'm getting through that. And like because who now I live in paradise, like
Right.
pretty far
Right.
from where I was. And so I really struggled around all of that for several years. I also came back with after effects that I didn't have before, that I had no framework for. I had no guidance around. They felt pathologic. It's the only place I could put it, coming from the nursing world. And the idea of mental health was that I genuinely believed I was schizophrenic for a while, because I was sometimes hearing voices, but not often. It was more just a knowing or a fleeting emotion or feeling that like I didn't recognize as my own, that felt like it came from out of nowhere. I couldn't really be around large crowds of people. Um, I was really struggling with a lot of stuff in that regard. And somewhere in there, I think it was about 2018, I was getting my hair cut by a woman, a new woman. I mentioned some of this stuff. And she goes, "Oh, honey, you're not crazy. You're just an empath." And I had never really heard that term except for on Star Trek Next Generation. And anybody that's familiar with that, so Deanna Troi is an empath, and she says really stupid things like, "I sense deception," when somebody's already lied. And so I was just like, okay, that sounds really silly, and then started doing a little more looking into it. And then realizing that, like, okay, yeah, a lot of these things that I was experiencing maybe aren't pathologic, but I don't have a framework for it or guidance. And so I started seeking out all different types of spiritual texts, all different types of um, experiences, from plant medicine ceremonies down in South America and Central America to sweat lodges up here in the States to meditation circles to, I mean, anything and everything. I became like a seeker of like, who knows how to do this stuff, right? Like,
Right.
I was raised Lutheran, and reading none of this was part of our world.
Right.
I joke that we were like Catholic light, it's Catholic minus a few of the rules. And so there were very clear boundaries as to what was and wasn't of spirit, what was and wasn't of God, what is acceptable, what isn't, um, what may or may not happen at death. And I didn't experience those things. So what do I do with all of that? You know? And so in that seeking, I found that there are many traditions that my experience fits into, you know? Um, and so that was really validating and super helpful, because then no longer was I just crazy. It was like, okay, so then if that's true, then what I experienced is true. And then the messages that I feel like I came back with of like, I'm here to help people die. Like, then that must also be true, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was kind of that deductive sort of process of like, okay, I'm not supposed to be a life coach. I'm supposed to be a death coach. I'm supposed to help people understand that this is just like brushing our teeth. It's just like taking off an old too tight shoe, like Ram Dass said. Um, and so, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. I feel like I went off on a tangent.
Yeah, you totally answered my question. And I would love to hear what is a death doula? Number one, I'm going to play like I don't know what that is. What is a death doula, and how did you know that that's what you were supposed to become? Like, was that something you heard in your near-death experience? Like, go home, coach people to die.
Yeah.
Like, how did you get there?
No, it was not that clear at all. And in fact, I came out of a really intense meditation experience and told my husband exactly that, right? I'm supposed to help people through death. I'm supposed to death coach. Um, and I'd never heard the term death doula. And I came out and I literally Googled death coach. And one of the first things that popped up was the Conscious Dying Institute, which is where I got my death doula certification. And in that one little Googling episode, I found the schooling that I went to and learned that a death doula is a non-medical professional that helps people through the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and practical aspects of end-of-life care. Everything from planning while we're young and healthy to actively walking through palliative care and hospice care and navigating that medical system with someone, to being at the bedside as they actively die, to being support for their family afterwards and officiating memorial services and celebrations of life. And so I'm kind of that full spectrum care at end of life, the relationship that's continual, right? That's outside of the family system, that safe third party for everybody involved, where everybody's got somewhere to be heard, someone to see them, someone to stand beside them. So yeah, I hope that answers the question in a fairly succinct way.
Yeah. What's the difference between what a death doula does and somebody like hospice?
Perfect question. Thank you. So death doulas are not an alternative to hospice. We are an accompaniment to. And so one of the things that many people don't understand is exactly what hospice offers and what it means. And so for starters, most insurances, certain hospices will be in network with an insurance company. Um, but you don't have to automatically go with the hospice company that your doctor or anybody else refers. So one of the things that I will do with families is sit down and interview multiple hospices, right? And ask questions about like, what is your nurse to patient ratio? How many nurses do you have on call at night? Where is your medical director? Are they here in the state or do they live out of state? I want to know these things. And these are questions many families don't know to ask. So that's part of what we do is to help find the right hospice team. Once we do, hospice is kind of threefold. It's a philosophy of end of life care, right? That says that we're going to tend to this whole person and this whole family through the entire process of dying. It's sometimes a physical place. Sometimes there are physical hospice wards in hospitals or physical hospice facilities where people can be transferred to. And there are some really, really prominent community hospice house programs as well. Like Omega Home is one that it's run by the community of peers, basically taking care of each other. And so it's both the philosophy of care, all of those different things about places, and then it's also an insurance benefit. And so Medicare covers a physician or a provider to see you in home, nursing care in your home, chaplaincy or spiritual advisement in the home, a social worker, access to volunteers. So that might be somebody that just comes and plays Scrabble or somebody that helps with a life review or offers respite care for a family. And then you also get a home health aide or a CNA to come help with activities of daily living a couple of times a week. And so all of those things come with hospice. Just like all other parts of our medical system, they're stretched super thin. And so in the early stages of being on hospice, it's likely that you see your nurse once a week, maybe your bath aide twice a week, physician or provider, your NP or your PA, usually once in the very beginning, and then at recertifications. So at 30 days and then 90 days, and that's it. And often your social worker or your spiritual advisor, maybe once a month or as requested. And so there's all of the other time and care that's required that's kind of up in the air. And so helping families navigate that and pulling in additional resources like home health care or caregiving services when needed, or helping arrange meals, making sure the household chores are getting done, all of that stuff, like helping coordinate, that's where a death doula comes in and can help as well.
Wow, what an angel you are then. Because I just can imagine how hard it is on the external family. And so to have somebody like you is probably, you seriously have got to be this angel that comes in and just really helps. So,
Well, thank you.
wow.
I would love to think of myself that way, but I honestly am a little more practical about it in that, right, for every other transition that we have in life, there are professions in place to help us. Like there are wedding planners, there are real estate agents, like we buy and sell large pieces of property. We bring somebody in who knows the process. And so this is very much that, and we use the term doula because birth and death are so similar. And so many people hear doulas in terms of birth and postpartum and lactation care. And the way I look at it is that we could honor and celebrate a death just as much as we can a birth. Doesn't mean we don't hold room for the sadness and for the grief and that we don't honor that and we don't feel it, because that's both, right? There's this beautiful sacred transition and a birthing into the spiritual that's happening as the physical body here is dying. And so it's my goal to get us to just honor this as like the biggest life transition that we do.
Right. How many years have you been a death doula now?
So I started my private practice, so Conscious Crossroads, in September of 22. So I'll be 4 years next month.
Okay. So I'm curious, as in this 4 years, how have you seen the culture around death shift? You've got to have seen it shift a little bit because even the term death doula, I never even heard it before, but now I'm starting to hear it and become aware of what it is. So I'm curious what your perspective is on the shift that you've seen.
I've seen a huge shift in just these first few years. When I first started, attempting to offer my services and to basically anybody who would listen to me, retirement homes, senior centers, like anywhere, it was just like, you want to give a presentation on what? And people are like, a death hula, and now it's very much, oh, you're a death doula. Oh, I saw one of those on the Pit, like this really new, amazing show that everybody's aware of that's winning awards right and left. Like there was a death doula in the ER with a client fairly recently. Um, a really famous and prominent death doula, Lua Arthur. She runs a training school called Going with Grace. She has a book out that I highly recommend that's called Briefly Imperfectly Human. And it's her own story. And again, that authenticity of showing up with your story and your truth. And she talks through losing her brother-in-law and the depression surrounding that and how that led her into transitioning from an attorney to a death doula and how she uses those two skill sets now in her practice. Similar moving from a nurse to a death doula. Uh, there are two really big novels out right now that many people have heard of: the Collected Regrets of Clover and The Book of Two Ways. And the protagonist in each of those is a death doula. So like pop culture is picking up on it. And so I think that's helping a ton because just the idea and the concept is one thing. It's one thing to be like, okay, so why do I need you in addition to hospice? But when you read about a story, when you hear about a personal interaction, all of a sudden it starts to make sense and it starts to fit. And so it's made it a lot easier in the last, I would say, year and a half, probably 2 years, compared to the first 2 years that I was trying to get the word out.
Yeah, and it's also such this interesting thing to me, this unique perspective you have is, I mean, I look at your story and I feel like, oh my gosh, God was preparing you your whole life path, you know? It just seems like God has been preparing Danielle to become this amazing death doula at this specific time. And I'm curious how your NDE and how your prior experience affect you now as a death doula and that unique perspective that you have.
A ton, I would say. And so in some ways I'm still working to process this because I don't want to necessarily feel bad, but in some ways I almost feel like I have a little bit of a cheat code, where like I talk to and I work with many other doulas, especially locally with another organization that I run. And I've had some pretty quick success with filling my client load and just word of mouth and referrals and whatnot. And I think it is exactly what you just said is people hear my story and it's this, well, who better to be a travel guide, right? Than somebody who's like at least walked up to the gates. And so that it helps a ton, not just in that regard of people kind of relating to me and feeling like they might want to work with me. But then when I'm at the bedside, and I think this is on very selfishly a huge part of why I do it. At every death, I get to touch home. At every death, I feel that space. I feel the absolute overwhelming joy and gratitude for the person being released and for the person no longer in this body, for the person who gets to go home. There's this slight bit of envy. And that is right alongside the grief and the sadness and the pain of those left behind. And so I feel like I really am in this very unique position to hold both, right? Not just from an intellectual perspective, but from a lived experience and felt sense. And I think that both my clients who are dying and the families can feel that. And they sense that joy and they sense my comfort with what's happening. And it helps them. It helps them a ton. And not that one needs to have a death experience or a near-death experience or a shared death experience to be an amazing death doula. Really,
Right.
you just got to be compassionate and have presence and a little bit of training and know-how. But it's really 99% listening and presence. But that's how I think it helps me personally, is I have this kind of, it's a cheat code.
Absolutely. It's a cheat code. And I'm curious if you have like an experience, maybe with a client who's passed, maybe have you seen anything that one would call supernatural or angels coming to get their loved one? I'm curious if you've witnessed any of that in your practice.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting because again, I don't often hear or see much, but I it's all very much this felt sense and kind of these knowings and intuitive moments. But I worked with a woman who passed last August, so we're actually just coming up on her first anniversary. She was 92 years old, and she was the oldest client that I have ever had who sought out a death doula on her own. Right? I've worked with older clients, but it's always been family who has been like, "Hey, this is going on with my mom or my grandmother, and we would like to bring you in." This woman read a book with her daughter, and a death doula was in it, and she said she pointed at the page. She goes, "I need one of those. Find me one of those." And they did, and they found me, and we worked together for almost 18 months before she died. Seeing each other anywhere from once a month to then once every couple weeks, and then once a week, and then daily for the last little bit. And we talked through, I mean, this huge life review for her, unpacked a bunch of stuff. And when the time came and she knew that she was going to die that night, she literally looked at her daughter and said, "It's go time. Call Danielle." Just like a woman going into labor. And I walked into the room and she looked up at me and she was really short of breath at the time. She'd had lung cancer. And she just kind of looked at me and I nodded and she nodded. I said, "Okay." And I came and I set my stuff down and I was at her side and just kind of coaching her through and breathing with her and, helping her with secretions and whatnot. And she was coherent up until maybe the last 15 minutes of her life, which is fairly rare. And this was a woman who had been raised religious, but didn't believe much at this point, wasn't sure where things were going to go, was kind of more just, I'm going to be in the energy and in the wind and in the stuff. And her daughter's on one side of the bed and I'm on the other. And clear as day, she looks right at me. And she looks ahead again and she looks at me and she points and she goes, "Does that go all the way through?" And her daughter's eyes got huge and she looks at me and I said, "I don't know, follow it. See where it goes." She just nodded and she looks at me, she's like, "Okay." And it was just this from somebody who again didn't believe that something was to come or that something else was happening. And she very clearly, coherently was like, that go all the way through. And so I'd like to believe that, her husband and her angels and everybody else is at the end of that hallway or tunnel or whatever it is that she's seeing. But within minutes of that comment, she was gone. And
Wow.
and she was so present for it. Like completely inspirational. And so while it doesn't feel supernatural, to me, it's a big indication that there's so much more happening in that space in that room than we know. There are countless examples of people seeing their loved ones, talking to their loved ones. It's one of the things that we always ask, right? Are they having conversation with anybody that's passed yet? And I will phrase it that way, yet, so that when it comes up, family isn't concerned,
Surprised. Right.
or trying to talk them out of it or trying to medicate away these hallucinations. Um, and countless people have those experiences all the time. Or a husband will die and to the day, maybe a month later or exactly a year later, she goes and may have said, "Well, oh, he's coming to get me. Oh, I know he's coming. Like he wouldn't miss our anniversary." And you're like, "Okay." And it happens, and so there's so many examples of stuff like that I I have zero question, that not only do we continue, but that we have access to the support that exists on the other side that we can't see and feel all the time here. Like we always have access to that.
It's just remarkable. And thank you for bringing us a little bit into your practice and that experience. I just was overcome with my truth bomb chills. So thank you. And I thank her too, because I feel like that's a little bit of like, look at me, I did it.
Mhm. Yeah, very much so.
So that is so wonderful. It's so neat. And I just wanted personally thank you. I think I said this before we hit record that Danielle, you really are this person to me that Okay, so terminal and the creative behind it, like my thought process behind it. When I had the idea of terminal, I don't feel like it was even idea. I feel like it was knowledge that was like plopped in my head. Like, it's called terminal. And as I'm sitting with it, I knew almost immediately I'm supposed to speak with somebody who is about to pass, or at least can see the finish line, or has had to contemplate it, right? They've been given a prognosis. Near-death experiencers as well as the miraculously healed. And you being this person that has had a near-death experience and has such close relationships with those who are going to pass, like calling you on the phone and sharing with you my idea. You said something, do you remember what you told me?
Probably not.
Okay. That's okay. That's
And
okay.
again, I don't think it was even coming directly from me.
Well, what you shared, and I guarantee I could pull it out of you again, but you shared with me some people that they won't want to talk, and then you also said, but some people will. And so I'd love to hear your perspective, when we talked on the phone, kind of the knowledge that you had of that and why you gave me that feedback, because you have such close interactions with people who are terminal. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and now that you say it, I do remember that. And it's very much the case even with my clients, where there may be one day where they're just expressing and they're sharing and they've got a ton to give, and another day where they are super withdrawn and they can barely get anything out, you know? And I think that one of the biggest things that we as humans overcome is our sense of unworthiness. And to feel worthy of sharing your story, even at the end, right? Especially at the end when you feel you're most vulnerable, you're most exposed, um, sometimes you're most defeated. Like, that's kind of a big hill to climb for a lot of people. Of like, I'm worth this time and space. Wow, Alyssa wants to hear this. The audience wants to hear this. I have something valuable to share. Like, not everybody's ready for that. Not everybody can get there. Um, and I think that with the right safety and the right rapport and the right authenticity coming from the interviewer and the audience, you create that space, and all of a sudden people open up in ways that they didn't know that they had in them.
Right.
Um, and so I'm curious to hear how it's gone and how it continues to go for you, or like reaching out to people and saying, "Hey, do you want to be a part of a project like this?"
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know what? I just reached out to somebody who told me, I don't know if I'll actually leave this in the recording, but I just reached out to somebody and she told me the name terminal was off-putting. Like, she cannot allow that in her space right now. And I respect the hell out of that. I was like, I get that and I honor that. Thank you for honoring it for yourself. And then I start having all these like, oh no, is the name wrong question? The doubts start creeping in. But then I look back at the conversation that I had with a previous guest and I am blown away. Like, what I learned and how I'm continuing to learn from those guests who have been, who are terminal. I just know that there's a lot of lessons for all of us from somebody who is looking right at the end. And what are they doing with that time? And as they're reflecting, what do they feel like their life was about and what's important? So, yeah, thank you.
I'm really glad that you shared that. And I will say that especially in the beginning, right, where the term death doula wasn't widely used, and there's still a huge contingent of end of life doulas who don't like the term death doula. Because, right, we're not just there for the death. We do all of this other stuff too. And to me, it was really important, maybe similarly for you, of like, no, I want to use the word death and dying and dead, right? Because this is what happens to the body. That's not the whole story. That's not all of it. But let's start normalizing some of these words and the concepts. In the presentations I give, I have terminal in quotes on my slides because we're all terminal. like,
Yep.
headed that way. Like,
Yeah.
some of us are copers and others, but like, that's the reality. And if we can get there to that space, that doesn't mean we're giving up hope,
Right.
right? I think, but what we start to hope for can shift. We may not be hoping for more time, we're hoping for more quality, more compassion, and more connection, right? But to me, there's something incredibly hopeful about owning whatever term feels right, from death to terminal to whatever it is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you for
Ah,
sharing it.
absolutely. And thank you for just being a phenomenal friend. I really look at you as this person that God put right in my path to be a supporter of this project, to like, yes, you need to do this. And you were the confirmation voice. So thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really am just truly grateful for you. I'm shifting just a little bit here. So I have this idea of involving my audience in these near death experience interviews. And I reach out to them via social media, and then they respond a question, which I hope to bring to you. So I have a question from a follower. This is from Current of Consciousness. So I love that name. They're obviously big thinkers. And this is their question that I'm posing to you. Okay. I'm curious about the feeling of love described in NDEs. Does it remain present during the life review or shift in intensity? And how does it compare to love experienced on Earth? What makes it feel so distinct and immediately recognizable as love?
Mm. Mm. Good question. Um, it shifted in intensity, in that it was not always as intense as it was when the light was directly above me and I was solely focused on it. That was probably at its most intense, and that I felt the most a part of it. Throughout the life review, it came in because I, not Danielle, but the royal I, the cosmic I, the eternal I, was reviewing all of these experiences with this sense of motherly, fatherly, nurturing, compassionate energy. It was not with a sense of judgment. It wasn't with oh, so you screwed that up. Oh, see, now you're going to have to do that. There was none of that. It was just like, oh, yeah, that didn't feel good, huh? Okay, let's do it different next time. And so that sense of accepting, compassionate, unconditional love permeated the entire experience. And in many ways, has continued, right? Like we talked about, I was still human. I still have my moments. I still slip in and out of my patterns. I still get snarky, right? Like all of those things happen. And yet I walk through the world having felt that. And having had felt that, you can't ever walk through the world the same way again. And so I have not felt that exact intensity as I did with the light experience here, except for like at the deathbeds of my clients, or in moments of complete connection with another human where you lose everything else and you can just kind of lose yourself in someone else's eyes. And that's where it's that same love.
You took me back to a little moment I had with my husband that, like, I would describe it as like I could see into his soul. Like the eyes are the window to the soul. Like I could feel it. But I didn't have words for it. Um, it was love, but it was like intense presence as well. And so you just took me right there. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Now I'm lighting up because yes, that exact feeling, that's the same when you can drop the illusion of the separation. And I think that that's the biggest difference, is that most of the time here we're walking around assuming that you are you and I am me. And when you can drop that, that's when we can touch that completely unconditional love here in body.
Oh man, how do we do it? How do we do it? What's the magic sauce?
I wish. If I had the magic bullet, man, I'd tell you. I'd get a magic pill, whatever it would be, I'd take it. Um, and I don't think that there is any one way. And I think that's one of the keys, is that one of the dangers, I think, of our, or trappings, or whatever the right word is, of our human experience is the need to know. right? The need for something to be absolute. And along with that comes our idea that this is the truth, this is the way, this is the only way, and anything outside of that can't possibly be my God or of spirit. And I don't think that that's true at all. I think that it's kind of whatever gets you there and is kind and compassionate and empathetic to yourself and others on the planet. Like,
Yeah.
that's God.
Danielle, you've been an amazing, amazing guest. Thank you so much. Having experienced a peak beyond the final terminal, if you could tell everybody something about death, what is it that you hope that they take away from Danielle and your knowledge, your unique perspective? What is it you wish them to know about death?
I think the biggest thing that comes up over and over again is that there is nothing to fear. There's nothing to fear. That you will be held, you will be supported, you will be welcomed, you will be nurtured, and that it is one of the most natural, normal things that we experience. There's no way to do it wrong.